My name is Esther, and I'm 85 years old. What I'm about to tell you isn't a fairy tale. This is a beautiful story about pain and love, a love that was judged by my entire town, my family, and the church itself. At 20 years old, I was a small-town school teacher. I was devout, I was proper, and I committed an unforgivable sin. I fell in love with a man I could never touch, Father Anthony, our new priest. That love nearly got him killed. It caused him to be brutally beaten by the honorable men of the town. It led to me being locked up by my own father, and it forced us to choose between our faith and our lives. If you're listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because some truths need to be spread, even if they shake your beliefs. Some stories, no matter how painful, must be told. On Sunday, the church was more packed than on the patron saint's feast day. Everyone wanted to see the new priest. I sat in my usual spot, 5th pew, right side, next to my mother. When he entered to celebrate Mass, my heart skipped a weird beat. He was handsome, I won't lie. Tall, broad shoulders, neatly trimmed black hair. He must have been 28, 29 at most. But it wasn't just his looks that caught my attention. It was his voice. A deep, firm voice that filled the entire church without needing to shout. When he began his sermon, it was different from anything I had ever heard. He spoke about love, not that pious, distant love that priests always preached. He spoke of a God who truly loved, who understood human weaknesses, who forgave not out of pity, but out of compassion. His eyes shone when he spoke. His hands gestured with passion. Everyone was mesmerized. "This priest is going to cause a stir," my mother whispered in my ear. If only she knew. After Mass, as was custom, the priest stood at the door greeting the faithful. When it was my turn, he held my hand between his to greet me. "A pleasure. I'm Father Anthony. You are Esther?" I managed to reply, my voice coming out weak. "I'm the teacher at the school." "Ah, a teacher. What a noble job. We need to talk about the Sunday school classes for the children. Could you help?" I said yes, without even thinking. His hands were warm, soft, but firm. He held mine a second longer than necessary. Or was that just my imagination? The following week, I went to the meeting about the Sunday school. It was me, 2 other devout ladies, and the priest. But the ladies left early. They left the 2 of us alone in the rectory, discussing the materials. It was a simple house, attached to the church, with old furniture and a musty smell. "Would you like some coffee?" he offered. While we had coffee, we talked about everything. He told me he came from a family of ranchers, that he had felt the calling since he was a boy, that seminary had been difficult but rewarding. I talked about my vocation for teaching, my love for the children, my dreams. And marriage? "A beautiful young woman like you must have a line of suitors." I turned red as a beet. "I'm not thinking about that right now, Father. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be indiscreet. It's just..." He stopped, ran a hand through his hair, nervous. "Forget it. Let's get back to the planning." But something changed in that moment. The way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. The way he got nervous when our hands accidentally touched reaching for the same papers. I started going to church more often. I joined the choir, offered to help with anything I could. The other young women in town also increased their attendance. A young, handsome priest was a novelty that attracted, but I could tell it was different with me. During the sermon, his eyes always searched for mine. When he met me in the church hallways, his smile was wider. The devout ladies noticed, of course. Mrs. Patricia started to pick on me. "You're very dedicated to the church lately, Esther. A single girl needs to be careful with her reputation." "I'm serving God, Mrs. Patricia," I replied, but inside my heart clenched. The meetings to organize the Sunday school became weekly. There was always something left to discuss, some detail to resolve. One afternoon, we were in the sacristy organizing the children's books. I was on a small stepladder. He was below passing me the books. As I went to step down, I missed my footing. He grabbed me by the waist to keep me from falling. I clung to his shoulders. We stayed like that, frozen. Me still half hanging onto him, our faces very close. I smelled his scent, lavender soap with a hint of incense. His brown eyes were dark, pupils dilated. He looked at my mouth. I looked at his. "Esther," he whispered. "Father, please," I said, but I didn't pull away. I climbed down slowly, his hands still on my waist. We stood there, breathing the same air. Then he took a step back, as if he'd been shocked. "Forgive me, forgive me." He almost ran out of the sacristy, leaving me there trembling like a leaf. That night I didn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, my rosary in my hands, praying to Our Lady to give me strength. But deep down, it wasn't strength I was asking for. It was for her to make that feeling go away, that fire in my chest when I thought of him, that flutter in my stomach when I heard his voice. Well, the days went by. I tried to avoid being alone. I was so ashamed. Until the following week, I went to confession. When it was Father Joseph, I confessed 2 or 3 times a year. It was a family custom. I couldn't escape it. I knelt in the confessional, my heart pounding. And, regardless of who was behind that screen, I took my confession seriously. I would have to tell only the truth. That terrified me. "Father, I have sinned." On the other side of the screen, I recognized his breathing. He was silent for a few seconds, then answered in a hoarse voice, "Tell me your sins, my child. I'm having impure thoughts, Father. About someone I can't." Silence again. I heard him swallow hard. "Are these thoughts about someone who is committed? Worse, Father. It's someone who belongs to God." His breathing became heavy. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "I am sinning too, Esther." Oh, sweetie, can you imagine that moment? Hearing those words from his own lips, in that sacred place? I know. It was reckless, perhaps even wrong. But my dear, we were desperate. It was the only place in that entire town where we could speak our truth, even if it was just through that little screen. Can you imagine the relief and the sheer terror of that moment? The one place they should be repenting is the only place they can be honest. This confession changes everything for Esther and Anthony, but it also seals their shared fate. Every day, every night, I think about things I shouldn't. I dream of a life I can't have, with someone I can never touch. My heart raced. Through the screen, I saw his silhouette move closer. "Father, I'm not strong enough for this. I thought I was, but I'm not. When you walk into the church, it's as if the sun rises. When you smile, I lose my train of thought in the sermon. When you are near, I forget my vows. I forget the cassock. I forget everything." I started to cry softly. On the other side, I heard that he was crying too. "What are we going to do?" I asked. "Pray, Esther. Pray hard. And ask for forgiveness for this impossible love that God has allowed to be born in our hearts." After that confession, honey, things were never the same. It was as if we had opened a door that could no longer be closed. That door. You see, sweetie, it was both terrifying and a relief. Before that moment, it was just my feeling, but not anymore. Now, it was us. A secret, sinful us, perhaps, but a real us. And that changed everything. I spent the whole week without going to church. I told my mother I was sick, unwell. But it was a lie, you see. What I had was fear. Fear of looking at him and everyone realizing what I felt. Fear of not being able to control myself. But on Sunday, there was no way out. My mother practically dragged me to Mass. I sat in the back pew, far from the altar. When he came out to celebrate, I saw he was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. During the sermon, he searched for my eyes in the congregation, and when he didn't find me in my usual spot, his voice wavered for a second. It was so quick that only I noticed, but I noticed. The devout ladies started commenting that the priest was acting strange, distracted. During the consecration, his hands trembled so much he almost dropped the chalice. At communion time, I stood in line, trembling like a leaf. When it was my turn and he placed the consecrated wafer on my tongue, our eyes met for an instant. I saw so much suffering in that gaze that my heart squeezed tight. May arrived with the Feast of the Blessed Mother. The church needed to be decorated with white and blue flowers, an old tradition in the town. I offered to help, even knowing it was dangerous. But you know how it is, right? We do such foolish things when we're in love. I went on a Thursday afternoon, thinking there would be more people helping, but when I arrived, it was just him sitting in the front pew praying the rosary. He heard my footsteps and turned. We just looked at each other for a second without saying anything. Then he stood up, picked up a bucket of flowers, and started decorating the altar. I grabbed another and went to the opposite side. We worked in silence for almost an hour, but it was a silence that screamed, you know? Every time we passed each other, it was like the air became electric. One of those times, I tripped on the bucket and nearly fell. He grabbed my arm, pulled me close so I wouldn't fall. We stood there, pressed together, his arm around my waist, my hand on his chest. I felt his heart pounding beneath his cassock. Mine was doing the same. He was the one who made the move. My dear. He tilted his head slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted, but I didn't want to. I closed my eyes and waited. When his lips touched mine, it was as if the world had stopped. A soft, delicate kiss, full of fear and desire mixed together. His hands trembled on my waist, mine trembled on his shoulders. When we parted, he rested his forehead on mine, eyes still closed. You could hear our heavy breathing, echoing in the empty church. Then he suddenly pulled away, ran his hands over his face, and started pacing back and forth like a caged animal. I saw him fighting with his own demons, wanting to say something but unable to. Finally, he practically ran out of the church, leaving me alone amidst all those flowers. I finished decorating, crying, my tears falling onto the white roses. The following weeks were hell, you see. He avoided me, I avoided him. But the small town didn't let us hide properly. We'd meet on the street, at the market, in the town square. Each encounter was torture. His eyes pleaded for forgiveness and begged for more at the same time. That's when Mrs. Patricia decided to meddle. That snake started spreading rumors that I was chasing the priest, that it was a scandal, that a proper girl didn't hang around the rectory. My mother found out, gave me one of those lectures. She said the pharmacist's son was interested in me, that he was a good match, that I should stop this nonsense and get married. The pharmacist's son was named Ryan, a decent-looking, polite young man with a future. He started courting me, showing up at school with flowers, inviting me for walks in the square. I accepted some invitations just to keep up appearances, to shut the wagging tongues, but it was a sacrifice, you see. Faking interest, smiling, letting him hold my hand while my heart screamed for another. June arrived with the summer festivals. The parish always held a big festival, with a square dance, hot apple cider stall, fishing booth. It was the event of the year in town. Father Anthony had to organize everything. It was his responsibility, and of course, he needed help. The devout ladies offered, the single girls too, and I couldn't stay away without raising more suspicion. The planning meetings were a sweet torture. We all sat around the table in the rectory, discussing details of the party, but I could only pay attention to him. The way he gestured when he spoke, his laugh when someone told a joke, the way he avoided looking directly at me. But sometimes I'd catch him watching me out of the corner of his eye. One night, it was almost time for the festival. Just the two of us were left finishing the paper banners. And of course, I stayed on purpose. I can't deny it. The ladies had gone home early, tired. We worked in silence, cutting, gluing. Suddenly, he stopped, dropped the scissors on the table, and looked at me. He told me he had tried everything, fasting, penance, prayer, that he had even used a discipline, a small whip, for flagellation, hoping physical pain would erase what he felt, but nothing worked. That when he saw me, he forgot all his vows, all his promises, that he dreamed of me, and woke up crying with guilt and desire. I also confessed my torment. The sleepless nights, the rosary prayed 1,000 times, the promises to Our Lady, the sacrifice of pretending to be interested in Ryan, of planning a future I didn't want. We cried together right there at that table full of colorful paper. Then he took my hand, kissed each finger slowly. I closed my eyes, let myself go. We kissed again, this time with less fear, more surrender. His hands on my face, mine in his hair. When we pulled apart to breathe, He pulled me onto his lap, held me as if the world was about to end. We stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other, saying nothing. I felt his heart beating against mine, the smell of incense and lavender coming from his cassock. It was wrong. I knew it. He knew it. But in that moment, nothing else mattered. The summer festival was a success, but it was also a martyrdom. Ryan invited me to be his partner in the square dance. I couldn't refuse without causing a scandal. So there I was, dancing, twirling, while I watched Father Anthony bless the bonfire, his face illuminated by the flames. Our eyes met over the fire, and it was as if the world disappeared. Only the two of us existed, and that impossible love. After the festival, things got worse. Mrs. Patricia had noticed our glances, began to openly campaign against me. She said I was a lost woman, that I was trying to lead the priest astray from God's path. She spread a lie that she had seen me leaving the rectory late at night. A lie. But in a small town, a lie repeated becomes the truth. My mother forbade me from going to church alone. My father, who hadn't interfered until then, gave me a sermon about honor and reputation. Ryan intensified his pursuit, even started talking about engagement. I was being suffocated from all sides. Father Anthony was also under pressure. The bishop sent a message through the vicar of the neighboring town, saying he had heard disturbing rumors. The devout ladies made a point of sticking to him all the time. They didn't leave him alone for a minute. It was as if the whole town had conspired to keep us apart. But you know what they say about forbidden fruit, right? The more they tried to keep us apart, the more we wanted each other. We started exchanging letters, left in prearranged places. He would leave them inside the missal I used in the choir. I would leave them inside the registry book in the sacristy. Words of love disguised as religious reflections, but anyone who read carefully would understand everything. In one of those letters, he wrote that he was thinking of asking for a transfer to go to the missions in Africa, anywhere far away from me, to see if he could forget. I cried so much reading that. The paper got all smudged. I replied, begging him not to go, that we would find a way, that God couldn't be against such a pure love. That's when we made the hardest and most right decision of our lives. On a full moon night in August, we met secretly at the grotto of Our Lady, high on the hill. It was dangerous. If anyone saw us, we were lost, but we needed to talk. The grotto of Our Lady was on top of the hill, about a 40-minute walk from town. It was a sacred place for us, you know? People went there to make promises, to do penance. But at night, nobody went up. The path was dark, full of loose stones, dangerous. But the desperation was so great that I would have climbed on my knees if necessary. I arrived first, my heart pounding with fear and anticipation. The grotto was small, fitting maybe 10 people tightly. There was a statue of Our Lady about 6 feet tall, all painted plaster, with that sweet and sad look at the same time. I lit a candle at her feet, asked for forgiveness for what I was doing, and protection for what was to come. When he arrived, he was without his cassock, wearing plain clothes, dark pants, a simple white shirt. It was the first time I saw him like that, without his priest's garments. He looked younger, more vulnerable, more of a man, and even more handsome. We sat on a concrete bench that was there, one on each side, not daring to get too close. He told me the bishop had summoned him, that he would have to go to the diocese the following week, that it was certainly about the rumors about us, that he would probably be transferred, or worse. His hands were shaking as he spoke, and I wanted so badly to hold them, but I couldn't. Not there, in front of Our Lady. I told him my father had arranged my engagement to Ryan, that the official proposal would be next month, that I had no way to refuse without causing an even bigger scandal, that my mother was already embroidering items from my hope chest, so happy her daughter was finally getting married. We sat in silence for a long time, listening to the crickets, the wind in the trees. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said he would rather be condemned to hell than live without me, that every day he prayed for strength, but God didn't seem to listen. Or worse, that maybe God understood that this love wasn't a sin, it was just love. That's when I turned to him and said I couldn't take it anymore either, that I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly, that life had lost its color, that marrying Ryan would be a cruel lie, that he didn't deserve a wife who loved another man, and that this other man, as impossible as it was him. He stood up, came close to me, knelt in front of me, took my hands in his, kissed one, then the other. His eyes shone with the tears he was trying to hold back. Esther, I swore before God, I made sacred vows. My whole family was there, proud, thinking their son would serve the Lord for the rest of his life. How can I break that? And I, Anthony, I'll have to break my own heart. Is that it? I'll have to fake love for a good man who doesn't deserve this farce? Is that holier than our love? My voice came out louder than I wanted. It echoed in the grotto. Our Lady looked down on us, and I swear I saw understanding in those plaster eyes. Or maybe it was just what I wanted to see. I don't know. He pulled me into a tight hug, his face buried in my neck. I felt his tears wetting my skin, his body trembling. I stood there holding him, stroking his hair, letting him fall apart. When a man cries like that, my child, it's because his heart is shattered. After a while, he calmed down, pulled away a little, dried his face with the back of his hand, looked at the statue of Our Lady, then at me, and said, "Let's try a little longer. I'll go to the diocese. I'll talk to the bishop, see what he says. You'll postpone this engagement, make up any excuse. We'll pray, ask for guidance, and see what God puts in our path. But if," his voice failed him, "if we're not meant to be together, then at least we'll know we tried to do the right thing." I agreed, even though my heart was screaming no, that the right thing was for us to run away together that very night. But my Catholic upbringing, the years of doctrine, all of it weighed on me. We still had hope that some miracle would happen, that somehow God would find a way for us to be together without sinning. They're clinging to a desperate hope, trying to do the right thing in an impossible situation. But as Esther will soon discover, the world doesn't always wait for miracles, and other people are already starting to take matters into their own hands. We went down the hill separately. He went first. I waited about 15 minutes. When I got home, my mother was still awake, sewing by the light of an oil lamp. "Where were you, girl? Are you crazy? Going out alone at this hour?" "I went for a walk, Mom. My head was full of nonsense, more like it. Tomorrow Ryan is coming for dinner. Put on your good dress, fix that hair." I went to my room with a heavy heart. I slept little. I dreamed of the grotto, of Our Lady pointing me down a path I couldn't quite see. The following week was one of the worst of my life. Father Anthony left for the diocese on Tuesday, stayed there for 4 days. I was like a lost soul, no news at all. Ryan showed up every day with something: chocolates, flowers, little notes. He was a good man, you see. It wasn't his fault. But every time he smiled at me, every time he held my hand, it was like a knife in my chest. On Saturday, he returned. I saw him get off the Old Town bus in the square, his small leather bag in hand, his black suit all wrinkled from the trip. He looked even thinner, with deep, dark circles. He crossed the square straight to the church, without looking around. My heart wanted to run after him, but there were too many people, too many watchful eyes. I waited until Monday. I made up an excuse that I needed to talk to him about Sunday school. An old excuse, but it was the only one I had. I went to the rectory early in the morning, before the devout ladies arrived. He answered the door, looked at me with those tired eyes, and motioned for me to come in. We sat at the same table where we had made the festival banners. It felt like a century had passed since that night, but it hadn't even been 2 months. He kept stirring a cup of cold coffee, unable to speak, so I asked him directly, "What did the bishop say?" He took a deep breath, ran a hand over his face. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse, tired. He said the rumors had reached him, that he's worried about my vocation, about my ability to keep my vows, that one of the ladies from here sent a letter, telling him. About us. My blood ran cold. Mrs. Patricia, probably. The bishop was kind, actually. He said he understands it's difficult, that temptations happen, but that I need to be strong, that the cassock demands sacrifices. He offered to transfer me to a larger parish in the state capital, where there's more work, fewer distractions. The word distractions hurt like a slap. Was that what I was to him? A distraction from his sacred life? He must have seen the pain on my face because he hurried to explain. That's not how he said it, Esther, but that's what I understood. That if I stay here, near you, I'll end up sinning. That it's best for me to leave before it's too late. And you? What do you want? He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw so much suffering that my heart almost stopped. I want you. I want to wake up next to you every day. I want to have a life with you, children, a home. I want to grow old with you. But I also don't want to disappoint God, my family, my vows. And I don't know how to reconcile those two things. We sat there looking at each other, the weight of the impossible crushing us. Then, I heard voices outside, the devout ladies arriving to clean the church. I stood up quickly, smoothed my skirt. I'll postpone the engagement to Ryan. I'll make something up. And you won't accept the transfer yet. We'll have more time, see what happens. He agreed, but we both knew we were just kicking the can down the road, postponing the inevitable. The following months were an agony I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Father Anthony stayed, but he changed. He became quieter, more distant. He celebrated Mass with almost no emotion, as if he were reading a cake recipe. He avoided being alone with me. There was always a devout lady nearby. I managed to postpone the engagement, telling Ryan I wanted to wait a bit longer, that it was all too fast. He accepted, but started to get suspicious. One afternoon, he saw me leaving the church and stopped me on the street. "Esther, do you care about me?" The question caught me off guard. I looked at his honest, hopeful face, and I couldn't find the courage to lie completely. "I care about you, Ryan. You're a good man, but you don't love me." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. I looked down, unable to answer. "It's because of him, isn't it? The priest." My heart hammered. "I don't know what you're talking about, Esther. The whole town sees how you look at each other, except for you two, it seems. Or do you think you're invisible?" I started to tremble. If even Ryan had noticed, then everyone knew, everyone saw. We weren't hiding anything, no matter how hard we tried. He's a priest, Ryan. Nothing is going to happen between us. But you wish it would. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was written all over my face. Ryan shook his head sadly. "I love you, Esther, I really do. And I would wait for you as long as it takes. But I can't compete with God, can I? Because that's what he represents to you. Something unattainable, sacred, forbidden. And I'm just an ordinary man." He turned and walked away, hands in his pockets, shoulders slumped. I felt an immense pity for him and a guilt that gnawed at me for days. The situation exploded on a Thursday in October. Father Anthony was in the confessional, hearing confessions. Mrs. Patricia went in. She stayed in there for almost half an hour. When she came out, she had that look of someone who's stirred up trouble, a malicious smile on her thin lips. On Sunday, during Mass, the priest from the neighboring town showed up unexpectedly. He went up to the altar and announced that Father Anthony had been urgently summoned by the bishop, that he would be staying at the diocese for an indefinite time for a spiritual retreat and reflection, that it was for his own good, that he needed to strengthen his faith. I looked at the pew where he usually sat during the parts of the Mass he didn't celebrate. It was empty. He had already left. He didn't even say goodbye. Just like that, he's gone, spirited away without even a goodbye. You can feel Esther's devastation. But this isn't the end. A secret message is about to find its way to her, and it contains a promise that will change everything. I ran out of the church. I couldn't stand to stay. I went home in tears, locked myself in my room. I didn't want to eat, didn't want to talk. My mother knocked on the door 1,000 times, worried. My father threatened to break the door down, but I couldn't come out. I couldn't face the world without him. A week passed. 2, 3. No news. The town gossiped. The devout ladies, triumphant, saying they had saved the priest from the clutches of perdition, that I was a disgrace, a shameless woman who had tried to lead a man of God astray. Ryan showed up again, even kinder this time, offering a friendly shoulder. Even he felt sorry for me. That's when something happened that changed everything. The rectory housekeeper, Mrs. Kim, a kind lady in her 60 seconds, stopped me on the street one morning. "Girl, I have something for you," she whispered, looking around fearfully. She handed me a folded, yellowed envelope. "He left this before he left. Asked me to keep it and only give it to you when I thought the time was right. I think now is the time." I took the envelope with trembling hands, hid it in my blouse, thanked her, and walked away quickly. I went to the only place I could read it in peace, the Grotto of Our Lady. I practically ran up the hill, my heart pounding. I arrived out of breath, lit a candle, and sat on the same bench where we had talked. I opened the envelope slowly, as if it would fall apart in my fingers. The letter was 3 pages long, written in his beautiful, firm handwriting, though some words were shaky. I read it once quickly, then again, slowly, savoring every sentence, every word. He told me that Mrs. Patricia had gone to confession and, instead of confessing her sins, had made an accusation. She said she had seen us kissing in the sacristy. A lie. It never happened. We had always been careful. But her word was worth more than ours, right? A devout woman of so many years, a regular churchgoer, a respected woman in the community. The bishop had no choice. Either he went on the retreat voluntarily, or he would be officially removed from the parish, with an investigation, a public scandal. He chose to go, to protect my reputation, to not expose me even more. But the part that truly made me cry was the end. He wrote that he had spent 6 months fighting what he felt, praying until his knees bled, fasting until he fainted, that he had tried everything to rip this love out of his chest, but the more he tried, the more it grew. That he had come to the conclusion that God had allowed this love to flourish for a reason, that perhaps the sin wasn't loving, but denying love. He ended by saying, "I will stay in the diocese for 6 months, as they asked. I will pray, think, reflect, but I already know what my decision will be. I can't live away from you any longer, Esther. If, at the end of these 6 months, you still want me, I will come back. Not as a priest, but as a man. And if you'll have me, we'll rebuild our lives together, far from here, where no one knows us. Wait for me. Please, wait." I clutched that letter to my chest and cried like a child. I cried with relief, with fear, with hope, with everything mixed together. Our Lady looked down at me, and I swear to God, I saw a smile on that plaster face. 6 months. He had asked for 6 months. That was 6 months, until April of 62. I could wait. I would wait. But how, my child? How could I pretend everything was fine, that I would go on with my normal life while my heart was trapped there in the diocese with him? I went back home that afternoon, with the letter hidden in my blouse. I passed through the living room where my mother was sewing, and she didn't even look up, already used to my silent comings and goings these days. I locked myself in my room, hid the letter inside the old Bible my grandmother had given me. No one would look there. 6 months. The words echoed in my head like a church bell. It was November 1961. So he would be back in April 1962. I grabbed the wall calendar I had in my room, one of those tear-off ones that came with a picture of a saint, and started counting the days, 180 days, more or less. It seemed like an eternity, but there was one thing the letter made clear, and it gave me the strength to endure. He was coming back, and when he came back, he wouldn't be a priest anymore. The decision was already made. He just had to serve that reflection time the bishop had requested. Or maybe demanded is the right word, huh? Because real reflection, you do it alone in your own corner, not locked up in a diocese far from everything and everyone. The first few days after the letter were strange. I had a huge secret locked in my chest, a hope I couldn't share with anyone. I'd walk through town and see people talking about the scandal, about how I had almost led the priest astray from God's path. Mrs. Patricia would pass me on the street and turn her face away, her nose in the air like a brooding hen. The other ladies would whisper when I entered the store. Even the kids at school would come home repeating what their parents said. But you know what's funny? It all hurt. Of course it hurt. But there was a part of me that didn't care anymore, because I knew the truth. I knew that in 6 months, I would have my love back, that we could be together, build a life without hiding, without lying. So the gossip from the ladies affected me less than they imagined. The real problem was my family. My father started pushing hard for the marriage to Ryan. He said I had already become a laughingstock in town, that I needed to get married quickly to clear my reputation, that the pharmacist's son was a saint for still wanting me after everything. My mother agreed with everything he said, adding that I wasn't getting any younger, that a 1-year-old girl who doesn't marry becomes an old maid. I had to use all my wits to stall. I said I needed time to recover from the whole trauma, that I wasn't right in the head, that marriage required emotional preparation. I faked headaches, feeling unwell, anything to postpone meetings with Ryan. The poor guy was getting suspicious, but he still insisted. He'd bring gifts, send notes, show up at school to walk me home. December arrived with that suffocating Florida heat. Classes ended. Summer vacation began. I hated it. It meant more time to think, to cross off the days on the calendar. Every night before bed, I'd cross off another day, counting down. 170 days, 165, 150. At Christmas, the house filled with relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone together for the meal. I sat at the table with stuffing, turkey, French toast, but I couldn't taste anything. The aunts looked at me with pity. The uncles avoided talking to me. Only my cousin Lily, who was always closer, came to really talk. She asked if I was okay, if I needed to vent. I almost told her everything, but I held back. I couldn't risk it. Any slip-up and my parents would find out. Christmas passed, New Year's passed. I entered 62 with a heart that was both anxious and hopeful. It was getting closer. Now, 120 days. Closer and closer. January was hard because there was no school to distract me. I stayed home helping my mother with chores, sewing, embroidering, cleaning, cooking, but my mind was always far away, always with him. Was he okay? Was he counting the days too? Did he think of me as much as I thought of him? The housekeeper, Mrs. Kim, had no more news. The new priest who had taken over temporarily was a serious man of 60 who barely spoke to anyone. It was in February that things really started to get complicated. Ryan showed up at the house one Sunday afternoon, all dressed up, with a small package in his hands. My father made me sit in the living room with him, while my mother made lemonade. He slowly opened the package and showed me what was inside. An engagement ring. It wasn't anything fancy. We weren't rich people, but it was pretty. A gold band with a small red stone in the middle. He said he had waited long enough, that he truly loved me, that he wanted to make me happy. He said he didn't care what the town said, that I was a good girl, that what happened with the priest wasn't my fault, that priests were men too, and sometimes the flesh was weak, but that I hadn't done anything wrong. He was being so kind, so understanding, that my heart ached for him. But I couldn't accept. Not like this, not knowing what I knew. So I invented that I still wasn't ready, that I needed more time. He was upset, of course, but said he would wait a little longer. My father was furious when Ryan left. He said I was playing the fool, that this was my last train, that if I didn't accept soon, I'd be left on the shelf for good. March arrived, bringing the first rains after the dry winter. I loved listening to the sound of the rain on the tin roof. It calmed me. Less than 60 days now. Less than 2 months. I started making plans in my head. We would have to run away. That was certain. There was no way we could stay in that town. I thought of Atlanta, a big city where nobody knew anybody, or Miami, which they said was even bigger. We'd start from scratch. I'd find a job as a teacher. He'd have to see what he could do. An ex-priest probably couldn't find work easily. But we'd manage. Because the future we were going to have was a total uncertainty, right? I didn't know if I'd find a job right away, how long it would take us to get settled. Better safe than sorry, as my grandmother always said. Look, my child, one thing I had in my favor was that I could save some money. My father always provided for the house, thank God. We never lacked food on the table or clothes on our backs. So, that teacher's paycheck I earned was mostly mine to spend. Before, I'd use it as I wished: a new fabric, a lipstick, a pair of shoes when I needed them. But after I read his letter, I changed completely. I started saving every cent. That's when Mrs. Kim showed up again. She found me at the market one Saturday morning and motioned for me to come over. She looked around to make sure no one was watching and passed me another envelope, smaller than the first. This time, I didn't have the patience to wait. I went to the back of the market, near where the farmers' delivery trucks were, and opened it right there. It was a short letter, just half a page. He said the time at the diocese was hard, that he woke up every day wanting to run back to me, that he prayed not for the strength to forget, but for the strength to endure until the end of that term. He said he was absolutely certain of his decision, that not a single day of reflection had changed anything, that he loved me more with each day that passed, and he asked me not to give up, to wait, that soon we would be together. I read that letter about 10 times, standing right there, leaning against the brick wall of the market. The tears streamed down, but I didn't even care. Mrs. Kim had left, but not before telling me something important. His retreat officially ended on April 15th. Less than 50 days. I walked back home slowly, the letter tucked in my skirt pocket. My mother complained that I had taken too long at the market, that the meat would spoil in the Sunday, but I barely heard her. I had a date now, April 15th. I marked it on the calendar with a big red circle. The days started to pass more slowly, or at least it felt that way. It was during this time that I started to quietly pack my things. I couldn't pack a suitcase, it would raise suspicion. But I set aside some clothes, a few keepsakes I didn't want to leave behind. The photo of my grandmother who died when I was little, the rosary she gave me, some books I loved. I put everything in a shoebox at the back of the wardrobe, hidden behind the winter blankets. I also wrote letters, one for my mother, one for my father. I didn't say I was running away, of course. I just said that sometimes we have to make difficult choices, to follow our hearts even when it seems crazy. I asked for forgiveness for any hurt, any disappointment. I said I loved them, but that I had found a love worth any sacrifice. I hid the letters with the clothes in the shoebox. One night in early April, I couldn't sleep. That's when I heard the noise. It was coming from the living room. Loud voices, a bang on the door. My father got up, grumbling about who was knocking at this hour. I heard him open it. I heard men's voices, many of them. My heart raced. I quickly put on my robe and went to the bedroom door. I pressed my ear against it to try and hear. Ryan's voice was the loudest. He was agitated, saying disconnected things about the priest, about letters, about scandal. My blood ran cold. How did he know about the letters? How had he found out? Then I heard him tell it. He said he had seen Mrs. Kim pass me an envelope at the market, that he got suspicious, followed her, pressed her until she told him everything. I know. You might be wondering how Ryan could make her talk. Poor Mrs. Kim. I never blamed her, sweetie. In a small town, when a man with standing puts on pressure, what choice did a working woman like her really have? Fear can make good people do things they never thought they'd do. That he had gone to the diocese, found out the priest was coming back, that the 6 months were almost up, that he had gathered a group of honorable men from the town to resolve the situation before it became an even bigger public scandal. My father asked what he planned to do. The answer made me shake from head to toe. They were going to the diocese to get the priest before he came back to town. They were going to make it clear he wasn't welcome, that if he tried to find me, he would regret it, that they were going to defend my honor even if I didn't want them to. This is the moment the story turns dark. A group of honorable men, led by a jealous fiancé, are now taking the law into their own hands. Esther is about to find out just how high the price for her honor truly is, and she's completely powerless to stop them. I ran out of the room. I entered the living room, still in my robe and with my hair down. There were about 6 men there, including Ryan, my father, and 2 of my uncles. They all stared at me, surprised to see me. I begged them not to do it. I said they didn't need to defend any honor, that I was fine, that nothing had happened. But the more I talked, the worse it got, because they saw in my desperation the proof they needed. If I was this desperate, they said, it was because something was going on. It was because I had gotten involved with the priest and was now waiting for him to come back to continue the sin. Ryan looked at me with a mixture of anger and pain I'll never forget. He said he had tried to save me, to give me an honorable name, a decent future, but I had chosen perdition, that now he was going to do what had to be done, stop that priest from coming back to corrupt me for good. My father ordered me back to my room. When I tried to stay, he practically dragged me. My mother had woken up from the commotion. She was standing in the hallway in her nightgown, her face pale. My father locked me in the room from the outside. I heard the key turn in the lock. I ran to the window, but it had bars, those old iron ones. I pounded, I screamed, I begged. I heard the men leaving the house, the sound of my uncle's truck being started. They were leaving right in the middle of the night to get to the diocese before dawn. I stayed there, clinging to the window bars, but I couldn't see anything in the darkness. My window faced the side of the house, not the gate. The desperation was so great that I even thought terrible things. I looked at the bottle of rat poison kept under the sink in my bathroom. We used it to kill pests. If they hurt him, if they stopped us from being together, I wouldn't be able to bear it. It would be better to die. I picked up the bottle, weighed it in my hand. Would it be quick? Would it hurt much? But then I remembered his letter. The words he said about our love, about building a life together. He was coming back, and I needed to be alive to meet him. I put the bottle back, sat on the floor, and prayed. I prayed like I had never prayed in my life. The hours passed slowly, like a snail in the Sunday. When dawn came, my mother unlocked the door. She brought coffee and toast. I didn't want it. She sat on the edge of the bed, tried to say something, but I turned my face to the wall. I didn't want to hear excuses, didn't want to talk. She left and locked the door again from the outside. I heard the key turn, and then her footsteps fading down the hall. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, full of water stains, counting the hours, imagining horrors. What had they done to him? Was he hurt? Was he alive? It was a Friday. I should have been at school at that hour, teaching the children. But I was here, locked up like a criminal in my own room. I thought about the children waiting, about the principal wondering why I was absent. I never missed school. Never. In 3 years of teaching, I had only missed once when I had a high fever. My mother told me she had sent a message to the school saying I was sick, unwell. But how long would that excuse last? On Monday, they would want to know. They would send someone to ask. I was going crazy in there, pacing from one corner of the room to the other, trapped and desperate. I wasn't just trapped in a room, honey. I was trapped in my own mind. The silence of that house was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own pacing. 1 step, 2 steps, turn. 1 step, 2 steps, turn. The walls felt like they were closing in. I'd press my ear to the door, listening for any sign of life, any news. But there was nothing. Just the muffled sounds of my parents living a life that I was no longer a part of. I was a ghost in my own home. My hope, which had been a bright flame for 6 months, was sputtering. What if they had? What if he was gone? The thought was a physical pain, a cold dread that started in my stomach and spread to my fingertips. I was completely, utterly powerless. This wasn't just a locked door. It was my life being stolen from me, moment by agonizing moment. End of time. I thought about that bottle of poison, my dear. I confess I did. Desperation can blind you, you see. But then I remembered his letter, his promise, and I realized that if I died, they would win. If I died, our love would die. I had to live. I had to fight. I beat on the door. I screamed. I cried. Nothing. My mother would appear with food, leave it on the nightstand, and leave without looking at me. I could hear her and my father talking in the house, but after he left for the store, the house fell silent. It was only that afternoon that I managed to get something out of her. When she came in with coffee, I grabbed her arm hard. I didn't let her leave. I told her if she didn't tell me what happened, I would go insane, that I had a right to know. I confessed to her that he was my life, my love, that I needed to know if he was okay. She started to cry. She sat on the edge of the bed, buried her face in her hands. Between sobs, she told me that my father had forbidden her from letting me out of that room for anything. He had made her promise that it was to protect my reputation, my honor, to stop me from doing something even more foolish. She was terrified of what he would do if she disobeyed. I looked at my mother, really looked at her. I saw her fear, but for the first time in my life, her fear didn't make me afraid. It made me angry. "So that's it?" I said, my voice low and steady, a voice I didn't even recognize as my own. "You'll let him keep me here until I rot? You'll let those men decide my life? You'll let my honor be more important than my heart?" She started to cry, saying she didn't know what to do. "Yes, you do, Mama," I said, walking to the door. "You can stand aside." I wasn't asking for permission anymore. I told her I was going to the diocese, with or without her blessing, that I had to see if he was alive, that if she tried to stop me, I would scream, I would break the window, I would make a scene so big that Mrs. Albright would be just the beginning. I told her I loved her, but I would not be a prisoner anymore. That girl she had raised was gone. She looked at me, shocked by this new person standing in front of her. She saw the resolve in my eyes. She knew I wasn't bluffing. She was quiet for a long time. Then she sighed, a deep, rattling breath that sounded like defeat. She didn't say, "You can go." She just stepped away from the door and whispered, "Be back before your father gets home." I knew she was giving me a head start. I didn't know if I was coming back at all. In that instant, the obedient daughter is gone. This is a pivotal moment for Esther, but also for her mother, who makes a silent choice to defy her husband. Esther is free, but what she finds at the diocese will be far worse than anything she imagined. In that very moment, sweetie, the obedient little girl Esther was gone. I wasn't just my parents' daughter anymore. I was Anthony's woman. Even if I had to walk 3 hours, even if I had to face the whole world, I was going. Because if I stayed, I knew I would just slowly die in that room anyway. I didn't wait for her to change her mind. I ran to my room, grabbed the shoebox with my things, gathered the money I had, changed my clothes, put on my best dress, tied up my hair. As I passed my mother, I stopped, gave her a kiss on the forehead, and whispered that I loved her. She didn't reply, just nodded, her lips trembling. I walked out the front door. It was almost 10 inches the morning. I walked quickly to the town square, straight to the taxi stand. Mr. Dale was there, leaning against his old car, smoking. When he saw me arrive with the box under my arm, he raised his eyebrows but said nothing. I asked how much he charged to go to the diocese. He told me the price. It was expensive, but I had it and accepted immediately. We got in the car. He started the noisy engine, and we left the square. I saw a few people looking, pointing, but now I didn't care. I just wanted to get there, see him, know he was really alive. The dirt road was full of potholes. The car bounced around like crazy. Mr. Dale tried to make small talk at first, asked if I was visiting relatives. I said yes, nothing more. He was quiet for the rest of the trip. I just stared out the dust-caked window, watching the landscape pass by. Orange groves, pastures, shacks scattered here and there. The sun was already high, strong. It was hot inside the old car, but I didn't even feel it. I only thought of him, of the look on his face when he saw me show up. The trip took about 3 hours. When we arrived, the sun was already past its peak. The diocese was a large, old building, made of gray stone, with a chapel on the side and gardens all around. It had a low iron fence and an open gate. Mr. Dale stopped the car out front, asked if I wanted him to wait. I said no. I didn't know how long I'd be. I paid him, thanked him, grabbed my box, and got out. I stood there on the sidewalk for a few minutes, looking at that huge building, my heart pounding. I took a deep breath, clutched the box to my chest, and walked through the gate on wobbly legs. The diocese garden was well kept, full of rose bushes, jasmine bushes, those white flowers that perfumed the whole air. There was a gravel path that led to the main door, and every step I took felt like it weighed a ton. When I reached the solid wood door, I just stood there, not knowing whether to knock, to push, or to shout. That's when the door opened. Or rather, a young priest opened it from the inside. He must have seen me through the window. He was a young man, about 25, thin, with round glasses. He greeted me with that polite, priest-like manner, asked if he could help. My voice came out faint when I said I needed to see Father Anthony, that it was urgent, that I had come from far away. The young man looked uncomfortable, glanced around as if looking for help. He said Father Anthony was on retreat, that he couldn't receive visitors, that those were the bishop's orders. But I hadn't come all this way to hear no. I took a firm step forward and spoke louder this time. I said I needed to see him, that I wasn't leaving without seeing him, that he could call the police if he wanted, but I would stay planted right there until I did. The priest was flustered, didn't know what to do. That's when I heard a voice coming from the hallway, an older man's voice. It was another priest, this one with gray hair, an impeccable black cassock. He was walking slowly, hands clasped behind his back. He asked what the problem was, the young priest explained. The older one looked me up and down, those piercing blue eyes analyzing me. Then he asked for my name. I told him. I saw him press his lips together, shake his head slowly. So it was me, the little teacher. The girl who had caused all this trouble. He didn't say it in those words, but it was all over his face, in the way he frowned, in the tired sigh he gave. He said I shouldn't be there, that my presence would only make things worse for Father Anthony, that his retreat was precisely to get away from these worldly temptations, but that if I had come all this way, then maybe it was God's will that I see with my own eyes the damage I had done. His words stung like a slap, but I swallowed my tears. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me weak. He motioned for me to follow, turned, and started walking down the long corridor. I followed behind, passing walls full of paintings of saints, crucifixes, holy images. We went up a marble staircase. We reached a hallway on the second floor. There were several wooden doors on both sides, all closed. The priest stopped at the third door on the right. He knocked lightly. No answer. He knocked again. Nothing. He opened it slowly, motioned for me to enter. The room was small, simple. A single bed against the wall, a nightstand with a Bible on it, a wooden chair. There was a small barred window, through which a sliver of afternoon light entered, and there, lying on the bed, was him. My Anthony, my love, my heart. It took me a few seconds to process what I was seeing. He was on his side, facing the wall, wearing a simple white hospital gown. But even from the back, I could see the bandages wrapped around his chest, visible under the gown. I could see the bruises that went up his neck and disappeared into his hair. The priest who had brought me spoke softly, that he had been like this for 4 days, that he had taken a terrible beating. He said the men from my town hadn't come to talk. They had come for blood. They found him praying in the chapel, dragged him out by his cassock, and beat him like an animal. They called him a disgrace, a snake in God's house. He told me that if the other priests hadn't heard the commotion, those honorable men would have left him for dead right on the chapel steps. A broken rib, Father Martin said, his voice cold with anger. 3 stitches over his eye. He's bruised from his chest to his knees. They did this in the name of honor, Miss Esther. They did this in the name of God, and spat on everything sacred while they did it. The doctor came, bandaged him up, gave him pain medicine. But there's no medicine for the kind of pain he's feeling now, the pain of having lost everything, his vocation, his faith, his hope, all because of them. The priest left, closing the door softly, leaving me alone with him. I stood frozen for a few seconds, the box still clutched to my chest, tears starting to flow uncontrollably. Then I left the box on the chair and approached the bed slowly, afraid of startling him. I sat on the edge of the bed, reached out a trembling hand, and lightly touched his shoulder. He stirred a little, moaned softly in pain, then lay still again. I said his name, softly. Anthony. My Anthony. He turned his head slowly, still without opening his eyes. Then he opened them. He blinked a few times, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. His eyes were sunken, tired, with purple circles under them. There was a nasty cut across his left eyebrow, closed with stitches. His lower lip was swollen, split. A huge bruise covered his right cheek. But when he recognized me, something changed in that suffering face. His eyes filled with tears, his mouth trembled. He tried to speak, but couldn't. His voice wouldn't come out. So he just reached his hand out to me, weak, trembling. I grabbed that hand with both of mine, pressed it to my chest, lowered my head, and cried onto that wounded hand, full of scratches, of punch marks. I cried for him, for me, for us, for everything we had lost, for everything we could still lose. He pulled my hand gently, making me lie down next to him on the bed. I curled up there, fitting my body against his as carefully as I could, so as not to hurt him. I smelled his scent, mixed with the smell of medicine, of bandages, of pain. But it was still him. It was still my Anthony. We stayed like that for a time I can't measure. It could have been 5 minutes or 5 hours. He ran his hand through my hair slowly, caressing me, while I cried softly into his chest. His breathing was heavy, pained, because of the broken rib. Then he managed to speak, his voice coming out hoarse, low. He asked how I had managed to get there, if I had run away from home, if my parents knew. I told him everything, about being locked in my room, about the school principal who saved my freedom, about taking the taxi and coming after him. He tightened his embrace, even though it hurt. He said it wasn't worth it, that I shouldn't have risked it, that this was all his fault, that he had ruined my life, my reputation, that I should go back, agree to marry Ryan, have a decent life. That's when I sat up in bed. I looked right into his bruised eyes. I said no. Never. That if he thought I had come all this way just to give up, then he didn't know me. That I had saved money, I had made plans, I had waited 6 months. That I wasn't going to throw it all away now. And that after Ryan had the nerve to do that to him, I hated that man with all my strength. I asked him if he still loved me, if he still wanted to be with me, if the beating he took had changed anything. He looked at me with those eyes full of mixed pain and love. He reached out, his battered hands gently touching my cheeks. He said he loved me more than he loved his own life. That during the beating, while they were hitting him, he only thought of me. That every punch he took was nothing compared to the pain of thinking he would never see me again. That the 6 months of retreat had been useless, because every day away from me only strengthened his certainty. The certainty that he would leave everything, the cassock, the church, the vows, everything, for me. We kissed, right there on that narrow bed, in the middle of that retreat room, a kiss wet with tears, tasting of blood from his split lip, but full of love, full of promise, full of future. That's when the door suddenly opened. The gray-haired priest was back. He was standing there in the doorway, with the look of someone who had seen something he shouldn't. But he didn't say anything. He just stood there looking, his expression impossible to read. Caught. In the one moment of tenderness amidst all this pain, that priest, Father Martin, now holds their entire future in his hands. His expression is unreadable, and his next words will decide everything for Esther and Anthony. Oh, my heart just stopped. To be caught, right in that moment. I thought, well, that's the end of it. But you know, Father Martin was a stern man, but he was also a man who could see into the heart. Perhaps he saw the cruel punishment Anthony had endured, and then he saw our love. Maybe, for the first time in a long time, he saw something that was bigger than any rule. I pulled away from Anthony quickly, wiped my tears. But I didn't feel ashamed, not anymore. I was tired of hiding, of pretending, of being afraid. I got up from the bed, smoothed my skirt, stood tall, looking directly at the priest. He sighed deeply, entered the room, closed the door behind him. He took my box off the chair, pulled the chair over, sat down. He folded his hands in his lap, looked at me, then at Anthony, then back at me. He said he was Father Martin, that he was the spiritual director of this retreat house, that he had seen a lot in his life. Many priests in vocational crisis, many doubts, many sins. But he had never seen a love like ours. A love that made a young woman travel 3 hours alone, defying family and society. A love that made a priest endure 6 months of forced retreat without changing his mind. He asked Anthony directly what he was going to do. Keep pretending he could forget? Accept the transfer the bishop had offered? Or have the courage to admit he had made the wrong choice years ago when he entered the seminary? Anthony tried to sit up in bed, groaned in pain. I helped him, supported him. He sat there, hand-holding his bandaged ribs, breathing heavily. He looked at Father Martin with those sunken eyes. He said he was leaving the priesthood, that he had decided a long time ago, that the 6 months there had only confirmed what he already knew, that he didn't have a vocation for celibacy, that he loved God, loved the church, but he couldn't love the way a priest was supposed to, that his heart had chosen another path. Father Martin was silent for a long time. Then he stood up, went to the window, stood looking out. The afternoon light streamed in, illuminating his gray hair, making it shine. When he turned around, his expression was different, softer, almost gentle. He said he would talk to the bishop, that he would explain the situation, that he couldn't promise anything, but he would try to do things the right way. A process of laicization, a dignified exit. But he warned, it will take months, maybe longer. The church doesn't like priests who leave the cloth, especially for a woman. They will do everything to convince him to stay, to change his mind. They will be harsh, unrelenting. Anthony said he could take it, that after everything he'd been through, church bureaucracy was small potatoes. Father Martin looked at me. He asked if I was also willing to wait, to endure, because the town where I lived wouldn't forgive me. My family wouldn't forgive. I would become a pariah, an outcast, the talk of the town. I looked at Anthony, lying in that bed, all beaten up, but alive. I looked into his eyes, which looked back at me with so much love it hurt my chest. Then I looked at Father Martin. I said I was willing to do anything, that there was no turning back, that I would go back to my town, teach my classes, save more money. And when the time came, when he walked out of here, free from the cassock, we would run away together, far away, start all over. Father Martin shook his head, a hint of a smile on his lips. He said we were crazy, both of us. But that maybe it was a holy madness, the kind God allows every now and then to remind men that love is greater than any rule. He left the room, left us alone for a little while longer. I sat there on the edge of the bed, holding Anthony's hand. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. We just sat there together. He would stay at the diocese for a few more months, to recover and to start the process of leaving. I would go back to town, pretend everything was normal, save more money. We would communicate through Mrs. Kim, who had already proven herself a faithful ally. When the time was right, we would meet. Maybe in Atlanta, a big city where no one knew anyone, or in some small town, far away, where we could start over without a past. The sun was already setting when Father Martin returned. He said he had arranged for a car to take me back, that it was better for me to go before dark. The dirt roads were dangerous at night. Anthony tried to get up to say goodbye, but he couldn't. The pain was too much. I bent down, kissed his forehead, his bruised face, his split lips. I promised I would come back, that I would wait, that I wouldn't give up. He held my hand tightly, didn't want to let go. I had to pull my hand from his. I picked up my shoebox from the floor. Father Martin was already waiting at the door. I looked back one last time before leaving. Anthony was lying there, his hand still stretched out towards me, his eyes full of tears. I went down that marble staircase with a broken heart that was, at the same time, full of hope. The car was already waiting in the courtyard. It was a black Ford, driven by an elderly man who worked at the diocese. I got in the back seat with my box. The ride back was silent. The driver didn't ask any questions. I didn't say anything. I just stared out the window, watching the landscape darken, the stars beginning to appear in the sky. When we reached my town, it was already night. I asked the driver to drop me off 2 streets from my house. I didn't want anyone to see. I got out, thanked him, and stood there, watching the car drive away. I walked quickly home, preparing a lie in my head. The house had lights on. I took a deep breath and pushed open the gate. My mother was sitting on the porch, sewing by the light of the oil lamp. When she saw me, she dropped her work, stood up. She didn't say anything, just looked at me, searching my face for answers. I told her I had gone, that I had seen him, that he was hurt, but alive, that everything was going to be okay. She nodded slowly, her eyes welling up. She said my father hadn't come home from the store yet, that he would be home soon, that I should go to my room and pretend I had never left. I went to my room, put the box back at the bottom of the wardrobe. Later, I heard my father come home, talk quietly with my mother, then his footsteps stopping at my bedroom door. He didn't come in. He just stood there on the other side of the door for a few minutes. I heard his heavy breathing, the way he breathed when he was nervous or angry. He unlocked the door. Then I heard his footsteps going to the back of the house. I lay in bed, staring at the dark ceiling. I could hear my parents talking softly in the kitchen, their voices muffled by the distance and the walls. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but from the tone, it sounded serious. My mother must have been telling him about Mrs. Albright's visit, about the threat of me losing my job. After a while, the house went quiet. I heard my parents go to bed. My father snored loudly. I could hear it from my room. I barely slept either. I just relived every second of that day. When the rooster crowed outside, it was already light. It was Tuesday. Time to go back to school. I got up, got dressed, put on my usual dress, tied my hair back, put on my shoes. I went down to the kitchen quietly, without making noise. Even though my father had unlocked the door, I didn't want to face him. After all, he had allowed all that violence. My mother was already there, making coffee. When she saw me, she stopped what she was doing. We looked at each other without speaking. In her eyes, I saw tiredness, worry, but also something like understanding. She knew. She knew I had gone, knew I had seen him, and she wasn't going to tell my father. I ate breakfast in silence. Toast with butter, coffee with milk. My mother just stood there, leaning against the stove, watching me. When I finished, I stood up to leave. That's when I heard my father's footsteps coming from the living room. He entered the kitchen, already dressed for the store. He looked me up and down, his expression grim. I just stood there, waiting. My mother clutched the hem of her apron, nervous. He looked at me, asked if I was ready to go back, if I could handle it. I said yes. He nodded slowly, ran a tired hand over his face. He said fine, I could go back to work. But there were rules now. No going out alone. No going to the church outside of Mass times. No talking to this person or that. I would go straight from home to school and from school to home. Any slip-up, and he'd lock me up again. I nodded. I wasn't going to argue. Not now. I grabbed my bag, walked out the front door. I walked slowly to the school, feeling the morning sun warm my back. The children arrived, noisy as always, happy to see me back. They asked if I was better, if the sickness had passed. I smiled. I said yes. I was all better. Mrs. Albright appeared at the classroom door, looked at me with those serious eyes of hers, and gave a small nod, a tiny gesture that meant a lot. She knew she had helped me. You see, sweetie? My mother let me go, but I truly believe it was Mrs. Albright who gave my mother the leverage, the excuse she needed. That visit, the threat to my job, that's what gave my mother the strength to defy my father. That little nod, that was the understanding of one woman to another. I'll never forget it. The days started to return to normal, or at least what looked normal on the outside. I'd wake up early, teach, go home, help my mother with chores, sew, cook. My father watched my every move, but gradually he relaxed. He saw I wasn't causing trouble, not running away, not making a scene. But inside, I was counting the days, waiting for news. Mrs. Kim would show up at the market every now and then, pass a quick message, that he was getting better, that the cuts had healed, that he could walk without much pain, that Father Martin had spoken with the bishop, that the process had begun. May turned into June, June into July. The weeks dragged on, slow as cold molasses. Ryan had given up on me for good, thank God. He didn't even show up anymore. The devout ladies kept talking, but quieter now. The scandal was fading into the past, old news nobody cared much about anymore. It was in August that Mrs. Kim brought me a letter. 3 full pages. He said the laicization process was moving forward, that he had met with the bishop several times, explained everything. That the bishop wasn't happy, of course, but he understood. That it would take a few more months, maybe until the end of the year. He also said he thought of me every day, every hour. That the beating he took was bad, but the worst part had been being away from me. That when he got out of there, free from the cassock and the vows, he would come for me. That we'd run away together to Atlanta, start from scratch. That he had even thought about finding work as a private tutor, that he knew Latin and history, that he'd manage, and he ended by asking me not to give up, that it was almost over. That soon, so soon, we could be together for real, without fear, without hiding, without lying. I kept that letter with the others inside the old Bible. September arrived, bringing the first spring flowers. It happened on a Saturday morning. I was at the farmer's market buying vegetables when I heard the noise. Raised voices coming from the square. People running, pointing. I dropped my bag right there. I ran to see what it was. In the square, there was a car stopped. A car I recognized. The black Ford from the diocese. And getting out of the car slowly was him. My Anthony. But different. No cassock. Wearing ordinary pants, a white shirt, suspenders. His hair was longer than before. His face still showed the marks of the beating, scars that would be there forever. I just stood there like a fool, unable to believe what I was seeing. He searched for me with his eyes through the crowd that was already forming. When he found me, his whole face lit up. He started walking toward me. The people parted, whispering and pointing. Mrs. Patricia was there, her face white as a sheet. Other ladies were making the sign of the cross, scandalized, but I didn't care. I only saw him. I only thought of him. When he got close, he stopped. We stood there, facing each other, without saying a word. His eyes traced my face, as if memorizing every detail. Mine did the same with his. Then he spoke, his voice firm, loud for everyone to hear. He said he wasn't a priest anymore, that he had left the cloth, renounced his vows, that he had done it for love. Love for me, that he was here to get me, if I still wanted him. What a moment of defiance. Anthony, no longer a priest, stands in the town square and claims his love for all to see. The entire town is silent, holding its breath, and all eyes turn to Esther. Her answer will be her final stand. That we were going to be husband and wife. The square went silent, everyone waiting for my answer. I felt my legs trembling, my heart racing. But it wasn't fear, it was joy, it was relief, it was love. I took one step toward him, then another, then I ran. I threw myself into his arms, in the middle of the square, in front of everyone. He held me tight, lifted me off the ground, spun me around. I was laughing and crying at the same time, clinging to him like a drowning person to a plank. When he put me down again, he framed my face with his hands, kissing me right there, in front of God and everyone. A long, deep kiss, full of everything we had held back for so long. People gasped, scandalized. But we didn't care. When we parted, he held my hand. He asked again, softly this time, just for me to hear, if I would go with him. If I was ready to leave everything and start over. I looked at that face I loved so much, at the scars he bore because of me, at the eyes full of mixed hope and fear. I said yes. That I had been ready for a long time. that I was just waiting for him. We walked out of the square, hand in hand, leaving the crowd behind. I went straight home to get my things. My father was there. He had heard the commotion. He knew what had happened. When he saw me walk in with Anthony, he turned purple with rage. He yelled that I wasn't going anywhere, that he'd lock me up again, that he'd rather see me dead than running off with a shameless priest. Anthony stepped forward, putting himself between me and my father. He said in a calm but firm voice that he wasn't a priest anymore, that he loved me, that he would take care of me, that he would make me happy. My father lunged at him, but Anthony didn't fight back. He just held my father's arms, blocking the blows without hurting him. That's when my mother appeared. She, who had always been quiet, who had always agreed with everything my father said, she put herself in the middle, separated them. She looked at my father with a firmness I had never seen in her. She said, "Enough," that I deserved to be happy, even if it was far away, even if it was with an ex-priest. My father just stood there, bewildered. He had never seen my mother confront him like that. She came to me, held my face in her hands, looked at me with those tired but loving eyes. She said I could go, with her blessing, that she prayed every day for me to be happy, that she didn't care what the town would say, what the ladies would say, that a real mother wants to see her child happy, and to hell with the rest. She hugged me tight, crying. I cried too, clinging to her. She made me promise to write, that she would be waiting. She said she'd talk to the school principal, explain everything. Then she let me go. I went to my room, grabbed the shoebox, the Bible with the letters inside, the money, my documents, and my teaching certificate. My mother looked at Anthony, told him to take good care of me, or she'd come after him and fix him. Anthony promised, seriously. We left the house, the sun already high in the sky. The diocese car was still in the square, the driver waiting patiently. It was the same man who had taken me back that time. He smiled when he saw us, motioned for us to get in. Before getting in the car, I looked back one last time. My mother was at the door, waving softly. My father had disappeared. He didn't want to say goodbye. A few neighbors were watching from their windows, whispering. Mrs. Patricia was at the church door, looking like she'd swallowed a lemon. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel fear. I just felt free. I got in the car. Anthony got in beside me. The driver started the engine, and we drove away from that little town in inland Florida, leaving behind all the suffering, all the pain, all the prejudice. The car bounced along the dirt road. Anthony held my hand the whole time. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. We just sat there together, feeling the hot sun coming through the window, the wind messing up our hair. We stopped in a small town along the way for lunch, a simple roadside diner. We ate meatloaf with mashed potatoes, drank strong coffee. Then we continued on. The driver said he would drop us off at the bus station in a bigger city. From there, we could catch a bus to Atlanta. We thanked him. He said it was nothing, that Father Martin had asked him to help us however we needed. We arrived at the bus station in the late afternoon. The driver helped us buy tickets for the night bus to Atlanta. He left us there, wished us good luck. We watched the black Ford drive away, taking the last piece of our old life with it. We sat on a bench in the bus station to wait. We still had 2 hours until the bus left. Anthony put his arm around my shoulders, pulled me close. I rested my head on his shoulder, closed my eyes. He started talking softly about the plans he'd made. He said in Atlanta, we'd rent a simple room at first, in a cheaper neighborhood. He'd look for work giving private lessons in Latin and history. I'd look for a job as a teacher. There were several schools in the capital. When we saved up some money, we'd get married at the courthouse, rent a small house, maybe have children, if God willing, live the life he'd always dreamed of, far from everything and everyone. That's when I remembered the money I had saved all those months. I opened the Bible, showed him the bills I had tucked away. He said it was a lot. Combined with what he had, it was enough to pay a few months' rent, and still have some left over. It was even enough to get married at the courthouse right away, without having to wait. His eyes lit up when he understood. We could get married for real, become husband and wife on paper. We didn't have to wait months saving money. We could do it right away, the very next day. We got on the bus when it was time. It was old, noisy. We sat way in the back. The bus started moving, rattling down the highway. I watched out the window as the small city faded behind us, disappearing into the darkness. The trip was long. The bus stopped in every town, people getting on and off. I dozed on Anthony's shoulder, woke up, dozed off again. He stayed awake the whole time, protecting me, holding my hand. We arrived in Atlanta in the middle of the night. The bus station was huge, full of people even at that hour. The noise of engines, the smell of diesel, people running back and forth with suitcases. Everything was so different from our quiet little town, where the only sound was wagging tongues. Anthony asked a man selling coffee where we could find a cheap boarding house nearby. The man pointed down a street, told us the owner's name. We thanked him. We stepped out into the cold Atlanta dawn. We walked about 3 blocks until we found the boarding house. It was an old 2-story house, with peeling paint, but clean. We knocked on the door. It took a while, but a woman in her 60 seconds answered, wearing a robe and with her hair tied up. Mrs. Gloria was her name. She looked at us suspiciously at first, but when Anthony explained that we were married and needed a room, she broke into a smile. She said she had a room vacant on the 2nd floor, that it cost so much per week, breakfast included. We took it on the spot. We went up the creaking wooden stairs. She opened the door to the room. It was small, simple, with a bathroom, a double bed, an old wardrobe, a chair, a small table, but it had a window with a lace curtain, smelled like bar soap, and had clean sheets. Mrs. Gloria left us alone. She said breakfast was served at 7 a.m. She closed the door. I heard her footsteps going back down the stairs. We stood there, Anthony and I, alone for the first time for real. Without fear of someone walking in, without needing to hide, without guilt. Just the two of us, husband and wife, even if it wasn't on paper yet. He looked at me in that way that made my heart race. He came over slowly, bringing his hands to my face, kissing me with a passion and a hunger we had held back for so long. He said he needed a shower and asked if I wanted to bathe him. I did. His hands trembled as he started to unbutton my dress. Mine trembled too as I took off his shirt. We made love that night, my child, for the first time. And it was beautiful. It was perfect. It was everything I had dreamed of and more, starting in that small shower and ending on that creaky bed. We didn't really know what we were doing. It was the first time for both of us. But love guided us, along with the desire that had been suppressed for so long. We didn't sleep at all, rediscovering each other, until the light started to come through the window. We were exhausted, but radiant. We finally slept until noon that Sunday. You know, my dear, when that first bit of sun came through the window, it wasn't just a new day. It was the first day of our real life. No more cassock, no more gossip, no more guilt. Just Anthony and Esther. Tired, yes. Poor, certainly. But finally free. On Monday, when we went down for breakfast, Mrs. Gloria served toast with butter, coffee with milk, and cornbread. She looked at us with that little smile of someone who knew exactly what had happened in the room, but she didn't say anything, just wished us good morning. After breakfast, we went out. Anthony asked Mrs. Gloria where the nearest courthouse was. She gave us directions, said it was about 5 blocks away. We walked through the waking city. Atlanta was huge, full of tall buildings, people rushing, cars honking, so different from everything we knew. But we were together, hand in hand, and that's what mattered. We got to the courthouse when it opened at 9 a.m. There were other people waiting too. When it was our turn, we presented our documents. The clerk looked at them, asked if we had witnesses. We didn't. He said we needed 2 witnesses. We looked around, not knowing what to do. That's when an elderly couple who was also waiting offered. They said they could be our witnesses, that all they had to do was sign the paper. We thanked them, moved. The wedding was quick, simple. The justice of the peace read some articles from the code, asked if we took each other as husband and wife. We said I do, our voices firm. We signed the paper, the witnesses signed too, and that was it. We were really married, husband and wife, in the eyes of the law. Anthony kissed my hand, then my mouth, right there in the courthouse. The witnesses clapped, smiled at us. We left there floating. I was Mrs. Anthony Taylor. He was my husband. Officially, legally, no one could separate us anymore. We walked back to the boarding house, slowly, savoring the moment. We went up to the room and fell onto the bed, exhausted. Now we could really sleep as husband and wife, legally married, with a future ahead of us. But reality knocked on the door soon enough. We spent 4 days without a care. We were just enjoying our honeymoon. Soon came the need to find work, to earn money, to survive in this huge city we didn't know. Anthony left early looking for a job. He went to schools, offered private tutoring, tried everything he could, but nobody wanted to hire an ex-priest. When he said he had studied in the seminary, that he knew Latin and history, people looked at him suspiciously, asked why he had left the cloth. He tried to explain, but he saw the judgment in their eyes, the condemnation. I went out looking too. I visited several schools with my diploma in hand. Nothing. The weeks went by and the money was running out. We paid Mrs. Gloria every week, bought the basics to eat, but every day that passed without work was another weight on our chests. It was in December that things got really tight. The money was almost all gone. We only had enough for 2 more weeks of rent. Anthony would come back to the boarding house every day with a defeated look, saying he hadn't found anything. I'd come back empty-handed too. One night, sitting on the edge of the bed, we cried together. Had it all been in vain? Had we left everything, faced everyone, just to starve in Atlanta? That's when Anthony had an idea. He said he would try to find work that didn't require references, a past, manual labor, carrying heavy things, anything. I said I'd do the same, that we couldn't be proud now. The next day, he found a job at a construction site, carrying bricks, mixing concrete, digging holes. He'd come home every day covered in cement, his hands raw, his back aching. But he brought home money. Not much, but he brought it. I found a job cleaning a house, heavy-duty housekeeping. The lady of the house was demanding, complained about everything. I was there from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., washing clothes, ironing, even cooking. My hands got calloused, my nails brittle. But I brought home money too. We only saw each other at night when we got back to the boarding house. We'd arrive exhausted, barely able to talk. We'd eat something quick, make love just once, and fall into bed. On Sunday, our only day off, we'd sleep late and then go for a walk, get some air. That Christmas was sad. There was no money for a celebration, for special food. Mrs. Gloria made lunch at the boarding house, invited all the tenants. We ate turkey, stuffing, rice. But my heart was heavy, remembering Christmas at my parents' house, my mother, the whole family together. I had already sent a letter to my mommy, who had replied and everything. She said my father was still angry, that he was sad, but stubborn. I cried secretly in the bathroom. Anthony found me there, held me, said things would get better, that this was just the beginning, that next year we'd have our own house, our own Christmas, our own family. January arrived, bringing an unbearable heat. Working at that family's house became even harder. The lady didn't have a fan. The kitchen was an oven. I'd sweat like crazy ironing all those clothes. Anthony suffered on the construction site too. The sun beating on his head all day, carrying weight without a break. He'd come home sunburned, with heat stroke, but he couldn't miss a day. We needed the money. It was in February that I found out I was pregnant. I started getting sick in the mornings, nauseous, dizzy. At first I thought it was exhaustion, overwork. But when my period didn't come, I suspected. I told Anthony one Sunday night. He just stood there, speechless. Then he hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. He cried like a child, with a mix of joy and fear. We were going to be parents. We were going to have a child. But along with the joy came the fear. How were we going to raise a child while struggling like this? Me working like a slave, him carrying bricks. Where would the baby sleep in that tiny room? I kept working as long as I could, but the morning sickness got worse. The dizziness increased. The lady I worked for noticed, and she fired me. She said she couldn't have a pregnant maid, that I was slacking off. I was jobless, moneyless, only Anthony's salary. Mrs. Gloria was understanding. Let us be late on the rent a week or two. That's when the miracle happened. Anthony ran into Father Martin on the street. By chance, the priest was in Atlanta visiting a parish. When he saw Anthony, he hugged him, asked how we were. Anthony told him everything: the struggles, the lack of work, the pregnancy, the desperation. Father Martin listened to it all in silence. Then he said he knew a private school run by nuns that needed a Latin and history teacher, that he would speak to the Mother Superior, put in a good word for him, and it worked. A week later, Anthony was called to the school. He spoke with the mother, showed her what he knew. She liked him, hired him on the spot. It didn't pay much, but it was better than carrying bricks. And it had dignity. Just when they hit rock bottom, an old friend appears like a miracle. Father Martin's help gives them more than just jobs. It gives them dignity. Their life is finally stabilizing, but the wounds from their past, the families they left behind, are still far from healed. It was what he had studied to do. Father Martin also helped me find a job. He spoke to the mother about me being a teacher. The mother said there were no teaching vacancies, but she needed someone for the school library, organizing books, helping students, managing the collection. I accepted immediately. The work was light, didn't require physical effort. I could do it sitting down most of the time, and it paid reasonably well. Combined with Anthony's salary, we could live. Things started to get better, slowly. We managed to rent a tiny little house in a neighborhood further out, 2 rooms and a kitchen, bathroom out back. It wasn't much, but it was ours. We bought some used furniture, fixed it up as best we could. My belly grew. Anthony would put his hand on it every night. He'd talk to the baby. He'd say he was going to be a good father, that he'd give our child everything he didn't have, that our child would grow up with love, with affection, with the freedom to choose their own path. I wrote to my mother, telling her about the pregnancy. She wrote back, said she was happy, that she prayed for me every day. My father didn't send a message. He still hadn't forgiven. In November, our first daughter, Hope, was born. That's what we named her, because that's what she represented. The hope for better days, for a life built on love. The birth was difficult, long. Anthony stayed outside the whole time, pacing back and forth, nervous. When the midwife brought the baby girl wrapped in a white blanket, he cried. He took her in his arms so carefully, as if she would break. He looked at me, lying in bed, exhausted but happy. He said we had made it, that it was worth every hardship, every tear, and it had been. Right there, in that simple little house, with our daughter in our arms, we were happier than any king or queen. We didn't have much money, no luxuries, but we had love, we had family, we had each other. The first few months with Hope were tough. She cried a lot at night, wouldn't let us sleep. I'd breastfeed in the middle of the night, tired, sleepy. Anthony helped however he could, changed diapers, rocked her to sleep. Money was still tight. Cloth diapers had to be washed every day. Milk was only from the breast. She nursed a lot, my little chubby girl. We got clothes donated from the nuns at the school, but we didn't lack the essentials. The girl was well cared for, well fed, full of love. It was when Hope was about 3 months old that I got a letter from my mother. She said she wanted to come meet her granddaughter, that she couldn't wait any longer, that she had convinced my father to come with her, that he had almost agreed. Anthony and I were so excited for that visit, but at the last minute, his pride won out, because my mother came, but she arrived alone. She said he wouldn't come, that he wouldn't set foot in the house of a disobedient daughter who had dishonored the family. My mother then decided to come alone, even though he was against it. She arrived on a Friday afternoon, thinner, older, but her smile was the same when she saw me at the door. She hugged me, crying, asking to see her granddaughter. I lifted Hope from the crib, put her in her arms. My mother just stood there, looking at that little face, tears streaming. She said the girl was beautiful, that she had my eyes, my nose. She stayed with us for a week. She slept on the living room sofa, didn't complain about the discomfort. She'd wake up in the night when Hope cried, helped me with everything. Washed clothes, cooked, cleaned the house. She said it was so I could rest, that a first-time mother needs help. We talked a lot that week. She told me my father hadn't changed, still stubborn. But deep down, she knew he missed me, that he looked at my photos in secret. He just didn't have the courage to admit it. I asked about people in town, about Mrs. Patricia, all the devout ladies. My mother laughed. She said the town had forgotten the scandal, that there was new gossip to occupy their tongues, that Mrs. Patricia had gotten sick, was tamer now, that people asked about me, some with sincere curiosity. She got to know Anthony better, too. At first, she still had that suspicion, that hesitant manner. But when she saw how he cared for me and the baby, how he worked hard, how present he was, her heart softened completely. She said I had chosen well, that he was a good husband, a good father. When it was time to leave, she cried as if her heart was breaking. She didn't want to leave her granddaughter, didn't want to go back to an empty house, but she had to go. My father was alone. The house needed tending. I promised I'd write every week, send photos when I took them. She promised she'd be back soon, that she'd work on my father's hard heart until it softened. 2 years later, John was born. This time the birth was faster, easier, a big, whiny boy who nursed like a little calf. Hope was jealous at first, but she soon grew attached to her little brother. My mother came again when she heard John was born. It was the 4th time she'd visited. She always brought clothes she had sewn herself, little wool blankets she had knitted, and lots of cloth diapers. She also brought messages from my father, that his pride was cracking, bit by bit, because she only talked about me and the children. He wanted to know everything every time she came back from our house. With John's arrival, the house got even tighter. We bought a used crib, put it in our room. The girl slept on a makeshift bed in the living room. It wasn't ideal, but it was what we could manage. Anthony started tutoring at night to supplement our income. He'd come home late, exhausted, but never complained. He said he was doing it for us, for the family, that one day we'd have a bigger house, a better life. And slowly, with a lot of work and sacrifice, things started to get better. We managed to buy some new furniture, replace the old pots, buy clothes for John that weren't hand-me-downs, small victories that made us feel like we were making progress. When Hope was 5, I got pregnant again. And if I tell you, you won't believe it. It was twins, Mary and Anna, 2 at once. I had to stop working at the library around that time. I couldn't manage the job while pregnant with 2 and already having Hope and John at home. Money got tight again. We went back to eating beans and rice every day, saving on everything. The doctor warned me during the pregnancy, but it was still a shock when they were born. They came early, at 8 months. 2 tiny, fragile little girls, but healthy, thank God. As soon as they were born and got a little stronger, about 4 months later, I went to a photographer. We rarely took pictures, but I told Anthony it was important to have memories of the children, that life passed too quickly. Hope and John only had 2 or 3 photos. This time, I asked for identical copies of the same portrait. It was expensive, but I wanted it. In the photo, I was holding Mary, Anthony was holding Anna, with Hope and John in front, all dressed up, smiling. It was the complete family. I sent a copy to my mother with a letter, telling her about the twins, how difficult the premature birth had been, but that thank God, the girls had survived. That now there were 6 of us, a big family, full of love. A month passed. 2. No answer. I got worried, thinking the letter had gotten lost. I remember thinking, I never send photos. The one time I do, it doesn't even arrive. I was already preparing another letter, this time explaining that the photo probably hadn't arrived. I even asked Anthony to take it to the post office. Until one Saturday afternoon, someone knocked on the door. I opened it and almost fell over. It was my mother, and next to her, half hidden, ashamed, holding his hat in his hand, was my father. I just stood there, not knowing what to do, what to say. That's when Hope appeared behind me. She was 5, curious, smart. She looked at the two of them at the door. My mother, she knew from visits. She ran to hug her, but my father, she had never seen him. Before I could say anything, she asked who that man was. My voice trembled when I answered that he was Grandpa. Her grandpa, whom she had never met. The girl didn't think twice. She ran into his arms, hugged his legs, looked up with those big eyes, and said she had asked God to send her grandpa to meet her. I saw my father trying to hold back tears. He swallowed hard a few times, trying to maintain that tough posture, that angry demeanor. But he couldn't. He broke down. He wept without shame, without hiding, the tears of a man finally letting go. The tears fell and fell, wetting Hope's little dress. John came too and joined the hug. He couldn't hide it anymore, couldn't pretend he didn't care. I broke down too. My mother was crying. We just stood there at the door, all three of us crying, Hope not really understanding, but happy to be in her grandpa's arms. The twins were sleeping inside, still so tiny. My father looked at me over Hope's head and asked for forgiveness. He said he had been stubborn, proud, stupid, that when he saw that photo, the whole family together, the 2 new granddaughters he didn't even know, his heart couldn't take it anymore. That he had cried in secret for my mother, looking at that photo, seeing the grandchildren he had never held. That he had told my mother he wanted to come, that he needed to meet his daughter's family. I hugged my father and mother right there at the door. We stayed like that for a long time, holding on, crying, letting years of resentment flow away with the tears. Hope in the middle, asking why everyone was crying if it was time to be happy. And she was right. It was time to be happy. My father had come back. My family was complete again. Oh, sweetie, all those years I carried that ache in my heart, the ache of being rejected by my own father. And in just a moment, thanks to a photograph and a little girl's hug, it all just washed away. Forgiveness, my dear. It heals deeper than time ever can. They came in, properly met John, saw the twins sleeping in the crib. My father held each one, looked at them with those tear-filled eyes, said they were beautiful. Anthony came home from work later and was shocked by the surprise. He went to shake my father's hand, but my father wouldn't have it. He pulled him into a strong hug. He said he had judged him wrong, that he could see now that he was a good man, a good husband, a good father, that he truly loved his daughter. They stayed with us for 2 days in that cramped house. They slept on the living room sofa, didn't complain. My father helped however he could. He fixed the dripping faucet, the cabinet with the loose door. My mother cooked, took care of the kids, washed clothes. Before they left, my father called me out to the yard. He said he wanted to help, that he had sold a piece of his land, that he had some money saved, that he wanted to give it to us to buy a better house, to get out of that cramped rental. I refused at first. I said we were managing, that we didn't need it, but he insisted. He said it was a father's duty to help his daughter, that he had wasted years on foolish stubbornness, that now he wanted to make up for it. I accepted, crying. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough for a down payment on a small house, enough to stop renting and have a place that was truly ours. When they left, my father hugged me at the door, said he loved me, that he was proud of me, that I had always been a good daughter, studious, hard-working, and very brave, that I had followed my heart while he had followed his pride, and in the end, I was the one who was right. I watched them leave in the taxi, waving from the window. This time, I didn't cry from sadness. I cried with gratitude, because God had given me my father back. He had healed that wound that had ached for years. The money my father gave us got us out of that tight spot. We managed to make a down payment on a little house. 5 rooms, counting the kitchen and bathroom. Tiny little rooms, but ours. We weren't paying rent anymore. It was our achievement. The years went by. The children grew. Hope was studious, always with a book in her hand. John was mischievous, couldn't sit still for a minute. The twins were joined at the hip, did everything together. One minute they were fighting, the next they were playing. My parents came to visit twice a year. They always brought something for the grandkids, toys, clothes. We didn't go to their house because money was tight. My father had become a different man. He played with the children, told stories, showed affection. Everything he hadn't done with me when I was little, he did with his grandkids. It was his way of compensating, of fixing the mistakes of the past. And when I looked at Anthony, his hair starting to go gray, I saw the same man who had looked at me in that church so many years ago, the same love in his eyes, the same dedication, the same certainty that we had made the right choice. And our life was about to change completely, from water to wine, as they say. It was the day the letter arrived. Anthony came home from the school with an envelope in his hands, his face serious. He sat down at the kitchen table, opened it slowly. It was from Father Martin. I read over his shoulder as he read in silence. The priest wrote that he had been visited by Anthony's family, that his parents had sought him out at the diocese, wanting news of their son, that they had been upset when he left the priesthood, of course. It was a huge blow. His mother had cried a lot, his father had been furious, but that over time, after many years, the pain had given way to longing. They wanted to see their son, meet their daughter-in-law, their grandchildren. They wanted to make peace. After more than a decade of silence, Anthony's family wants to make peace. But this isn't a simple store owner like Esther's father. This is the family of a powerful colonel, and their peace might come with a price. Keep listening, because this reunion will change their lives forever. Anthony just held that letter, his hands shaking. I knew what was going through his mind, the fear of rejection, the doubt of whether he should go, if it was worth the risk. But I also saw the desire in his eyes, the longing for his family, for his mother, especially. We talked all night. He told me things he had never really told me. That his father was Colonel Jackson Taylor, a powerful man in the region, a rich rancher, owner of immense lands. And the title of colonel he bore wasn't just military, it was the basis of his power in the region. He was the political boss, respected and feared throughout the inland area. A man of his word, but one who used his firm hand to ensure things were done his way. His mother, Mrs. Helen, came from a traditional family too. She was sweet, caring, but lived in her husband's shadow. She did everything the colonel said, never contradicted him. She suffered in silence when her husband was too harsh with the children. He said he had 3 siblings. Raymond and Michael, the older ones, had already followed in their father's footsteps. They managed the ranch, the politics, the business. Beatrice, the youngest, had married the son of a neighboring rancher, an arrangement made by her father. When Anthony entered the seminary, the colonel had thrown a huge party, invited the whole region, politicians, ranchers, important people. It was his son becoming a priest, an honor for the traditional family. He spent a fortune on the ordination, proud as a peacock. That's why, when Anthony left everything for me, the colonel swore he never wanted to see his son's face again. He said he had dishonored the family name, wasted the investment, turned his back on God. He cut off relations, forbade the family from even saying his name. But now, after 10 years, it seemed his heart had softened. We decided to go. We waited for the January vacation to not disrupt the children's school or Anthony's work. We saved up some money for the trip. We bought new clothes for the kids. We couldn't show up at his family's house looking like beggars. After all, it was the family of a colonel, of important people. The kids and I were all anxious to see a rich ranch. The day of the trip, we woke up early. The children were excited. They had never left Atlanta. Hope, at 9, was already a young lady. She helped take care of her younger siblings. John, at 7, couldn't sit still, asking about everything. The twins, at 4, tiny but smart, stuck to each other. I put matching dresses on them. We took the bus to the inland area. The trip was long, more than 6 hours. The children slept most of the way. Anthony and I stayed awake, looking out the window, nervous about what lay ahead. We arrived in the small city in the late afternoon. It was much bigger than our hometown, busier. It even had a movie theater, a big town square with a gazebo, beautiful houses. Anthony paid for a taxi to take us to the ranch. The driver knew the family. Everyone knew Colonel Taylor around there. Santa Helena Ranch, the largest and most prosperous in the region. The drive to the ranch was on a dirt road, about 20 minutes by car. On both sides of the road, there were pastures with Brahmin cattle, well-tended orange groves, impeccable white fences. There were even workers waving at the car, respectfully. When the main house appeared on top of the hill, I stared. It was huge. An old, 2-story colonial mansion, painted white with blue trim. A wide front porch with stone columns, a huge garden with a fountain in the middle, ancient trees providing shade. It even had a chapel on the side, tiny but beautiful. Anthony had said his family was well off, but I hadn't imagined this much. This was the stuff of very rich people, of a powerful colonel. I looked at our simple clothes, at the kids' scuffed shoes, and I felt ashamed. But this was our best. Anthony squeezed my hand, said it was okay. The driver stopped in front of the house. Before we even got out, the main door opened. A woman ran out, her hands to her face. It was Mrs. Helen, his mother. Her hair was already all white, tied in a bun. She was short, round, wearing a simple dress, but of good fabric. She had that sweet look of a mother who had suffered a lot. She ran to the car, opened the door. When she saw Anthony, she broke down. She grabbed her son like a drowning person clinging to a plank, weeping uncontrollably. He cried too, holding her, asking for forgiveness, saying he had missed her. They stayed there for a few minutes, hugging, crying. The children watched, not quite understanding, until Mrs. Helen pulled away, dried her tears with an embroidered handkerchief, looked at me, and gave a wide smile. She pulled me into a tight hug. She said I was beautiful, that I had taken good care of her son, that she thanked me for making him happy. Then she knelt for the grandchildren, hugged each one, kissed them, made a fuss. The twins were scared at first, hid behind me, but she was so affectionate that they soon warmed up. Hope, always polite, curtsied just as she'd learned in school. John had already fallen in love with his grandmother, asked her if she had any horses. That's when Colonel Jackson appeared at the top of the porch steps, tall, imposing, in an impeccable white suit even in the heat, gray hair and mustache neatly trimmed, a silver-handled cane in his hand. He had the erect posture of someone who had given orders his whole life, who bowed to no one. He just stood there, watching. His expression was serious, closed, impossible to read. The servants who passed by lowered their heads respectfully. Even the air seemed to have gotten heavier. Anthony dropped his suitcase, went to him slowly, climbed the steps one by one. He stopped in front of his father, took off his hat, held it in his hand. He asked for forgiveness, for disappointing him, for going against his will. He said he didn't regret what he did, but he was sorry for the pain he caused, that he understood if his father still couldn't forgive him. The colonel was silent for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. He looked his son up and down, saw the worn but clean suit, the dignified posture of someone who hadn't lost his way in life. Then he looked at me, at his grandchildren who were down below with Mrs. Helen. He tapped his cane on the wooden porch floor. Once, twice, 3 times. Everyone fell silent, waiting. Even the birds stopped singing. Then he dropped the cane, took a step forward, and pulled his son into one of those strong hugs that almost breaks your ribs. He clapped him on the back forcefully, his voice rough when he spoke. He said he had been too stubborn, too proud. That his son was a man, had the right to choose his own path. That he had lacked the courage to admit it sooner. Despite the social standing, in that moment, I compared the colonel to my own father. Mr. Gerald was stubborn, just like this one. I saw the colonel crying, too. A rare thing, something probably no one on that ranch had ever seen. Men like him didn't cry, didn't get emotional. But there, holding the son he hadn't seen in 10 years, he let the tears fall without shame. The powerful colonel, a man who never shows weakness, breaks down in front of his son. It's a powerful moment of forgiveness. The family is finally whole, and the colonel is about to make them an offer that will dwarf everything they've ever known. Actually, Thinking about it, my child, it was more than 10 years they hadn't seen each other. We had been together for 10 years, and he hadn't seen his parents since the scandal began in our little town, adding the time he served there before that. In truth, it had been about 12 or 13 years. Can you imagine that absurdity? Anthony's siblings appeared too. Raymond and Michael, the older ones, looked like their father. Strong, serious, but with relieved smiles. They were with their wives and children. Beatrice, the youngest, already pregnant, cried like a faucet hugging her brother. Everyone met the family, celebrated, held their new nephews and nieces. The colonel, when he saw me up close, joked. He said he understood why his son left the priesthood for me. I remember feeling my face burn with embarrassment. Mrs. Helen had the room that had been Anthony's since childhood prepared. We went up a beautiful, carved mahogany staircase. We reached a long hallway with several rooms. The room was huge, even luxurious. A large mahogany sleigh bed, a massive wardrobe, a vanity with a mirror. It had a window that looked out over the pasture, a beautiful view of the ranch, all lit by the afternoon Sunday. Dinner was served in the immense dining room, a table that could easily seat 20 people. Abundant food made by the house cooks. Rice, black-eyed peas, fried chicken, roasted pork, cornbread, salad, pecan pie, sweet potato pie. The children ate like they had never seen food before. Hope was embarrassed by so much bounty, but Mrs. Helen said to eat up, that there was plenty. I confess, I was a little embarrassed, because my in-laws' children were there, so well behaved at the table, and then there were my kids. Oh, my goodness, child, my goodness. During dinner, the colonel asked about our life in Atlanta, about work, the children, how we managed. Anthony told him about the early struggles, the hard work in construction, the fight to survive. I'd add a little here and there, talking about the kids, their school, the little house we'd managed to buy with help from my father, who was a store owner. Mrs. Helen cried again, hearing everything we had been through. She said if she had known, she would have helped. That it didn't matter what the grudge was. A son is a son. The colonel grew serious, his jaw tight. He said he had been too proud, that he should have sought out his son sooner, that power and money were useless if you lose your family. After dinner, the colonel called Anthony into his office. An imposing room, full of books, trophies, photos with important politicians. They were in there for over an hour. When they came out, Anthony's eyes were red, but he was smiling. The colonel came to me, called me daughter. He said he had behaved badly, that he should have accepted his son's love from the beginning, that now he would make up for lost time. In the following days, we saw the whole ranch. It was truly immense, bigger than I could have imagined. There was the main house where the colonel and Mrs. Helen lived. There were smaller houses scattered across the property where Raymond and Michael lived with their families. Beatrice lived on her husband's ranch in the next town. There were also houses for the employees, a huge corral, a stable with purebred horses, even a tiny school for the workers' children. The colonel made a point of showing his son everything, with pride. He introduced Anthony to the employees, the foreman, saying, "This is my son who has returned." He took us to the ranch office, showed him the ledgers, the documents, the expansion plans. One afternoon, we rode horses to a more remote part of the property. There, on top of a hill, was a large house, half hidden by trees. It was beautiful. One story, a wide, shaded front porch, a huge backyard with an orchard. Inside, it had a large living room, 4 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, 2 bathrooms. Everything was a bit dusty, needing cleaning and repairs, but the structure was solid, well built. The colonel said that house had belonged to Anthony's grandmother, his father's mother, Mrs. Scarlett. She had passed away about 5 years ago. It had been closed up ever since. No one lived there. He stopped there in the middle of the living room, leaning on his cane, looked at his son. He said that house was ours, if we wanted it, that we could renovate it however we wanted, paint, change the furniture, do whatever was needed. That there was a job for Anthony in the ranch's administration. It wasn't manual labor, it was educated work. Handling contracts, documentation, the accounts, business with other ranches, that I wouldn't have to work outside the home. I could take care of the kids, the house, plant a garden if I wanted. That the grandchildren would grow up there with space, fresh air, family nearby. I looked at Anthony, not knowing what to say. It was all too much. That house was bigger than any place we had ever lived, and the Colonel was offering a dignified job, a better life for our children. But there was Atlanta, the life we had built there with so much sweat, the school where he taught, the little house that was our own achievement, even if we were still paying it off. Anthony asked for time to think. The Colonel agreed. He said there was no rush, that the house would be there waiting, that the offer had no expiration date. That was a hard choice, you know. Atlanta, that was our struggle. That little house was built from our own sweat and tears. But when I looked at my children, I knew they deserved more than just cramped city walls. Sometimes, love means you have to swallow your pride for the sake of your children's future. We spent the rest of the vacation on the ranch. The children loved it. Hope learned to ride a horse with her Uncle Raymond. She spent all day in the stable, taking care of the animals. John was always running through the pastures, climbing trees, fishing in the pond. The twins made friends with the employees' children. They played with dolls in the shade of the mango trees. Mrs. Helen wouldn't let her grandchildren go. She baked cake every day, told stories of when Anthony was little, taught the girls to embroider. The Colonel, who everyone said was a tough man, melted when his grandkids called him Grandpa. He'd take John to see the cattle, put the twins on his lap to watch the sunset from the porch. We talked a lot, Anthony and I, on those nights at the ranch. Lying in that comfortable bed, listening to the crickets outside, the silence of the countryside, we weighed everything. Atlanta had been our struggle, our victory. But here, there was peace, there was family, there was a better future for the kids. We thought about the children, mostly. In Atlanta, they were growing up cramped, with no space to play, breathing car exhaust. Here, they would have a huge yard, nature, a good education. The Colonel had already said he'd pay for private school for his grandkids, that they wouldn't go without a quality education. On the last day of our visit, we called the whole family together. The Colonel, Mrs. Helen, the siblings, all sitting in the grand living room of the main house. Anthony held my hand, looked at his father. He said we accepted, that we would go back to Atlanta, pack up our things, sell the little house, say goodbye to the school, let my parents know, that in the middle of the year, we'd be back for good, to stay. A house, a job, a future for their children, all offered on a silver platter. After a life of struggle, Esther and Anthony make the decision to accept. This marks the true end of their painful journey and the beginning of the legacy Esther is sharing with us today, to rebuild our lives there. Mrs. Helen burst into tears of joy. She stood up, hugged her grandchildren one by one, squeezed them to her chest. The Colonel didn't cry this time, but his smile said it all. He stood up, shook his son's hand firmly. He said he would get everything ready, renovate the house, have it all prepared for when we returned. His brothers celebrated. Raymond said it would be good to have Anthony back, that he missed his brother. Michael agreed. He said the ranch needed someone with an education, with a good head for business. Beatrice cried, happy to have her brother close again. And I made beautiful friendships with my sisters-in-law and my mother-in-law. The children jumped, screamed. Hope asked if she could have her very own horse. John wanted to know if he could go fishing every day. The twins wanted to play with their cousins, the children of their uncles. On the way back to Atlanta, on the bus rattling down the highway, I stared out the window, thinking about everything. Life takes such turns, doesn't it, my child? We had left a small town as fugitives, starved and struggled in the capital, built a life from scratch with so much sacrifice. And now we were returning to the countryside. But this time, with family, with acceptance, with love, with the opportunity to give our children the childhood we didn't have. Anthony held my hand. He said God works in mysterious ways, that everything we went through had been necessary, that the 10 years of struggle in Atlanta had taught us value, humility, gratitude, that now we knew how to appreciate blessings without getting lost in them. We arrived back in Atlanta and began the process of moving. Anthony said goodbye to the school, where the nuns wished him well, and I said goodbye to the friends I had made. We sold the little house, that achievement that had cost us so much sweat. I sent a letter to my father and mother telling them the news. My mother replied immediately, overjoyed that we would be closer, saying the towns were neighbors. Even my father sent word that we had done well, and that a united family was a blessing from God. In July, we went back to the ranch, this time for good. The house was beautiful, all renovated. The colonel had painted it, replaced the floors, bought new furniture. There were beds for the kids, wardrobes, a big table in the kitchen, a sofa in the living room. The first few months were an adjustment. Anthony, learning the administration work. Me, learning to take care of that big house. The children started school in town, adapted quickly. Hope was the best student in her class, the teacher's pride. John made friends with everyone. The twins were the darlings. Everyone thought the two identical girls were charming. The years went by. Life on the ranch was good, peaceful. Anthony worked with his father, learned everything about ranch administration. He became a respected man in the region, known for his honesty and competence. I took care of the house, the garden, the kids. I had time to embroider, to read, to talk with the neighbors. The children grew up there, healthy, happy. My parents came to visit often now that we lived close, sometimes twice a year. My father and the colonel became friends. They'd spend hours talking about politics, about farming, playing dominoes on the porch. My mother and Mrs. Helen were like sisters. They'd sew together, trade recipes, watch the grandkids. When the colonel died in 1995, it was Anthony who took over much of the administration. Raymond handled the farming, Michael the livestock, Anthony the business and contracts. The ranch prospered even more, the family united, working together. The grandchildren grew up, got married, had children. Hope became a doctor, returned to the region to work at the town hospital. She married a good doctor, had 2 beautiful children. John stayed on the ranch, married the daughter of a neighboring rancher, had 2 kids as well. Anna became a housewife, didn't like school, got married, and had 6 children. She broke our family record, but neither she nor Mary had twins. We were always hoping, thinking it would happen. Mary became a teacher, like me, and had just 1 son. We saw the great-grandchildren arrive. Children running through the same house where our children had grown up. The noise, the joy, life renewing itself. Anthony's hair turned gray, then white. His back got a little stooped, his hands trembled. I aged too. White hair, wrinkles marking my face. But the love was still the same. Every morning waking up next to him was a blessing. Every night falling asleep on his shoulder was gratitude. On hot afternoons, we'd sit on the porch of that house the colonel had given us. We'd look out at the ranch stretching below, the children playing in the yard, the sun setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Anthony passed away 3 years ago. I found him fallen on our bedroom floor. I don't know if he suffered. I pray to God he didn't. It was a heart attack. He was 91 years old. A long, well-lived life. Did I cry? Of course I cried. I still cry today when the longing hits hard. But I don't cry with regret. I cry with gratitude. Because God gave me the privilege of loving and being loved by that man for more than 60 years. Now, at 85, I sit on this same porch. My children come to visit every week. My grandchildren call every day. My great-grandchildren run around here every afternoon. The house is still full of life, of love, of laughter. And you know something, my child? Telling my story here to you all was one of the best things I've done in a long time, because I had to relive every little piece, every detail that was already half forgotten deep in my memory. Things I hadn't thought about, hadn't revisited, in so long. And it was so good, you see. It was like living it all over again. Every joy, every pain, every moment of fear and courage. When I close my eyes now, I can feel his hand in mine with the same strength as before. I can still hear that deep voice, telling me he loves me, just the way he said it every day. I still see that handsome young man in a cassock, declaring a love that the whole world said was impossible. And it was real, my dear. It was real, and it was beautiful. Thank you for listening to me, for letting me share this piece of my heart with you. My story shows that it's never, ever too late to start over. It proves that your voice, even when it's just a whisper, has the power to change your whole world. And it shows that true love will heal every wound. May God bless every one of you listening right now. And if one day you find a love that's worth fighting for, don't you dare give up. Because in the end, love is all that remains. It's the only thing that makes it all worthwhile. My story is done, sweetie. Now, I'd love to hear a piece of yours. What's the biggest battle you've ever fought for love? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel so we can share more stories together. Stay blessed.